For me, I started with Bravehearts in 2014 as a case manager, supporting survivors going through the Royal Commission. And during that time, for me, what I felt meant the most for them was really the opportunity to be heard, because for a lot of my clients, it was the first time they've ever told anyone. And the first time they've had to actually name and really speak about what happened to them before people that they felt believed by. And that, meant so much to them, and really gave them the opportunity to hold those institutions that had hidden this for so long to be held accountable. For me, it felt like it was a day of reckoning for them. I think the biggest impact of the Royal Commission that I saw was it almost felt like it was a day of reckoning for institutions that made it their effort to hide what had happened. And it really named and shamed them into, before the community. And actually they had to, for the first time, own what had happened in their institutions. The unspeakable things that they had done to these children and the ways that they had gone about hiding them and denying that it had happened. For me, it was a society, I think Australian society was finally able to really acknowledge what had happened to these children. And I think it really brought the topic of sexual assault to the greater public, and it started a conversation that Australia hadn't seen before. I really see two biggest impacts that have helped survivors access justice. For me, the first one is the removal of the limitation periods. They were the thing that prevented a lot of survivors being able to pursue any sort of justice against the institutions, and their removal really enabled these institutions to, these clients to come forward, survivors to come forward, I should say, to be able to be recognised and compensated for what happened. The other thing that I consider has been, the greatest impact for survivors to access justice has been, the introduction of legislation which makes it mandatory for institutions that are aware of sexual assault happening within their organisations to have to report it to police. Because as we saw through the Royal Commission, confessionals for the Catholic Church was what they hid behind, and now they can't hide behind that anymore. And they can't pretend it didn't happen. So there are real repercussions now, and I think that it is my hope that it will have, will bring some justice for kids and prevent it maybe from happening in the future. No, I think, the Royal Commission had a significant impact and, in community, and really brought some of those issues to the forefront that, that prevented people from coming forward. But as great as that was, there's still a lot of things that can be done. And I think as a support service, one of the number one things we see is the difficulty it's for people to come forward and actually report abuse, historical abuse, to police. Because police, as great as they can be at times, can also be really not trauma-informed, nor understand why it takes a survivor 20, maybe 30 years to come forward. So, training, I think, is one of the things that it's still lacking and still really prevents survivors from coming forward and actually being able to have a day of reckoning and have that justice against the people that harm them. What's working well for survivors? I think the fact that they have a choice now, that it's not just about pursuing civil claims anymore. They have an alternative choice for them that that allows those that couldn't come forward before a softer approach. Yes, it's not perfect, but it is a choice that they now have. There are a lot of things that are working well. Well, there's things that are working well. And I think, the outcomes, the way they're delivered is improving a lot. The fact that people can now get an advance payment of $10,000 has really helped some survivors. So I think they are doing, they try their best, and I think they are doing what they can, but there is certainly a lot of things that they can improve on. As a support service, for us, the number one thing is process. It just doesn't seem to work. And if it does work, it's only sporadically. I think for it to be an effective process, we really need to be open and honest about how it operates. It's still very secretive. There is, minimal opportunities to actually understand what is happening along the way. And it is only through strong advocacy that at times we're able to get answers from the scheme. I think for it to be a trauma-informed process, it needs to be open, and it needs to, give access to survivors for information that they request. Sometimes there are questions asked by the scheme and you don't know why, and there's no clarity behind that, and there's no, they're not even forthcoming why they ask for things. I think if it was more transparent, then it'd give more confidence to survivors coming through. There's inconsistency in the processes and a lack of understanding of how these inconsistencies impact survivors and their trust in the process. We are, 4 years into the scheme? And yes, along the way, improvements have been made. But I think if you truly want to be a trauma-informed process, then really you need to understand and possibly replicate what was happening with the Royal Commission, and really, have survivor at the heart of the process rather than a process having to fit into the client having to fit into a process.